Welcome to Midcard Maniacs. I'm Jay.
And I'm John.
And today's good idea, bad idea is on Matt Cardona signing with AEW.
Yeah.
Obviously, most people know Matt Cardona as one half of the Wrestling Figure podcast, but most importantly, he is Zack Ryder from WWE.
Yeah, I think even he sometimes forgets that he's Matt Cardona, as stated on Talk is Jericho podcast, but recently debuted and signed with AEW. After a long tenure in WWE, he comes to AEW. And pretty much, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing that he's here?
Personally, I'm like in the middle, so it's not a great debut episode for good idea, bad idea. We need like a good idea, maybe idea, and bad idea. Because I wasn't a huge fan of Zack Ryder personally, only because all we saw him do was lose over and over and over again. So it's hard for me to get excited for somebody who is just a notable jobber to the point where he even had like a storyline about how much he lost. Why should I be excited? To me, I don't really care. I know that a lot of the wrestling community does care, and they're like, he's the best, the internet champ. Let's get him on here. But to me, I didn't really care personally.
Whereas I was a huge Long Island Ice Z fan. Like, I was always watching his YouTube show. I was rooting for him to get that push in WWE. So I'm more in the favor of it being a good idea, but only if they book it correctly. I'm a little hesitant with him teaming with Cody, because when he comes out to help him, I don't know what direction they would go in, whether it's him versus Cody or him and Cody working together. But I think what would be a cool storyline is if they play off of him being the internet champion. So you have a TV champion in Cody and an internet champion in Matt Cardona.
I like it.
So that would be a good draw for both being the elite and all of AEW's internet stuff, having Matt Cardona represent the internet, and then you have Cody representing television, being like, yeah, they work together, but then eventually they have this grand feud of who is the real champion, the one holding the internet belt or the one holding the television belt.
And this could even you mentioning that, this could play into the bigger aspect of AEW. As we all know, the former champion, whatever, the demo god himself, Chris Jericho, is constantly talking about TV ratings. And so I think that a good transition could be Zack Ryder even breaking apart from Cody and going further and just challenging Jericho just strictly on how business is done. How Matt Cardona has built a name for himself based on his podcast, his love for action figures, and without having necessarily a great career in WWE, people know his name and we're excited for his debut. And I think that there's a lot of ways that he can really excel in AEW. I don't know which I would prefer. Obviously there needs to be some kind of rivalry between Cody and Zack. Isn't this like a Disney thing? Zack and Cody? I know they're good friends in real life, but I think they definitely are going to come to war. Whether it's over the titles themselves, I don't know. I hope they introduce the Internet Championship. And based on Matt's recent photo shoots, he does have the Internet Championship in his arms. So it is there. He is thinking about it. And I think that people would be thinking about that as well.
If AEW didn't recently give Brian Cage the FTW title, I could totally see them putting this into a storyline, the internet title. Because when you have too many not fake titles, but too many titles that people have personally created, I guess personal titles, then there's no value to them.
Right. So maybe it's a prolonged thing. It could show up in about a year and it would be everyone would love it. And it could be a shock at that point because you would immediately think that he would introduce that now. But you're right. With the FTW coming in, it would be AEW is just making up titles because they don't come up with their own. And then you'd have the other side of Twitter well, how are there this many titles in the men's division and no tag team titles in the women's? They need to play things smart here.
At the end, honestly, I feel having someone like Matt Cardona in AEW is a really good idea. From a leadership standpoint, a veteran presence, and in-ring ability, he could easily put someone to the next level with a tag team or feud. He could also hold his own. He has that strong support. He's a name that people recognize and would get behind. I don't think he should ever be a heel. I think he needs to be that babyface, and I fully believe that AEW did a good job signing Matt to a contract and can use him wisely.
I think after this discussion, I would echo that. So at first, I was pretty lukewarm on Zack Ryder or Matt Cardona. But like talking about the possibilities of him, I think there's only great storylines that can be told. Like I think they basically write themselves, and if y'all know AEW, what they are lacking a lot of the time is storylines. And if this one plays the way that everyone thinks it could,
you have him go with Cody, you could have him feud with Cody, but I think what would be a really nice storyline, one to get someone to that next level, MJF. Can you imagine MJF mocking Matt Cardona for everything that he's been through? When you add truth to a storyline, it becomes deep and it becomes meaningful. And you're just gonna make MJF that like bigger heel than he already is. And Matt Cardona is the kind of guy who can take the loss but make someone that much better.
Right. Like you picture MJF talking shit about losses and how he was a nobody and I've always been a somebody kind of thing. And then even just like talking about action figures, because that is just globally known that, oh, that's a nerdy thing to talk about. Like, oh, you like action figures? Well, thankfully that's not the case in 2020. However, in MJF's mind, you know that he was like that dickhead that would clown on somebody for liking action figures, even though he's gonna praise when he is one. Even that could be a thing. Like you could work kayfabe into their podcast and they could be reviewing their action figures. There are levels that this can go, and I'm for that. So this, I think, collectively is a good idea. So what do you guys think? Is Matt Cardona signing to AEW a good idea or a bad idea? Let us know in the comments. Like this video, and if it's your first time here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, stay up to date with everything Midcard Mania.